Hey everyone, welcome to the Black Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Dr. Sherelle Hobson. I'm your student athlete resilience coach and your consultant. Many of you know that I have a doctorate in sports administration and leadership, and my study was on African American males, the effects of athletics on their educational plans. So I'm very passionate about what skills that we are having or teaching our young Black males while they're enrolled in our high school. I hear like another background beat, and making sure that we're providing enough tools that our students can be productive once they leave the system, whether in high school or college. Do they have the necessary skills to be productive, whether they're being entrepreneurs or going to professional sports or even going to college? And so that's what I specialize in, where I coach coaches on how to create this safe place within their athletic program. And so that's just one thing that I just enjoy doing. And I had the pleasure of linking up with Mr. Streak, who also have an extensive background dealing with young Black males. And so we have a company called HSBA, where we have a mentorship and leadership program that we implement onto high schools, college, and HBCUs around the world, that we give them and teach them, provide them with the necessary skills they would need, building those relationships, self-identity, their value, who they are within this system. And we feel like it's very important because we know that within the educational system, they don't teach those necessary skills. So for many of you who have been either in education or you have children in education, you know that our students are not prepared when they leave. They may be prepared when it comes to school and studying habits, maybe, but they're not prepared to be productive citizens, whether it's through their mental health or their physical health. The schools are not teaching those things right now. So HSBA focuses on all those areas of life so that they can have a full overall productive life. And so if you check us out on We Are HSBA, you will find out more about the Black Podcast as well as our company. So we want to thank you for coming on to the Black Podcast and making sure this is the part that's important. Okay. Don't just sit here and watch it. You need to make sure you're sharing the video, because you never know who's in your circle of people that may need to hear these stories. We have a very powerful woman today on, and it would be a shame if we don't share her story within our community, because we know that this is something that we see on a daily basis that definitely needs to be addressed. So please make sure that you're sharing the information, because you may think that you don't need it right now, but you never know what your journey might be later on. But you also never know who's in your circle of people that may need to hear her story. So please make sure you are sharing the video right now.
Yes, indeed. And I'm not going to take the mic for too long because you guys hear and see me enough. Brian Street, Your Legacy Begins, now a company I started a few years back to really start to tackle the need of funding when it comes to mentoring and leadership programs. So I help run multiple different companies where a portion of my revenue goes towards the development and sustainability of mentoring and leadership programming. But ultimately, I just came to a point where I understood the importance of the necessity of the Black community understanding how to utilize and put into effect group economics, start supporting one another, understanding one another, and being there for one another so that we can start to build that community that we need to become the powerful force that it is that we have to offer. The guest that we have today is someone that is really going to bring some valuable information, and I love to have just so many different guests come on. I love the fact that we are all across the spectrum, people who have lived all different types of lives, because we want to show the world that we are not a monolith. We are so different. Each and every one of us has our own expertise, our own story, and it can impact so many lives if we only leverage each other to be able to tell our stories and be that example of what you can be in the future. So without further ado, our guest today, we have Miss Nakeisa Jackson. Talk to us. How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you for having me. I love this platform. I love what you all do for the community. So I'm really excited to come on to just share my story today and just be able to encourage somebody on this Thursday evening. Actually, I was like, what today is?
We're so glad. When I saw you, I only got a portion of your story. Of course, I can only see so much through pictures. But I was like, I don't know what she got going on, but we need to have her on like ASAP. And so I appreciate you accepting the invite and just being very open to sharing your story. We know that within the Black community, a lot of times we're taught, you don't tell people your business.
Yeah.
And so that's why a lot of us are not growing within our community, because we don't want to tell people our business. So we appreciate you sharing your journey with us here on the Black Podcast. We want to make sure that we maximize our time with you so that the guest really gets the full story and you don't feel rushed or anything. But we do want to start off from the very beginning, like where you were born, and kind of the dynamics of your family, like what that was like, growing up.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. So it was a different type of Atlanta back then. So I grew up, like I always say that I grew up on like two sides of one fence, if that makes sense. So on my mother's side of the family was very middle class, but my mother and father divorced when I was 3 years old. So my father lived in every hood in Atlanta that ever existed. Like we moved very often. So when I would come to him, it was always a new place to go. So I kind of got to see what it was like on both sides. Like growing up as a child, I got to see that. I was the oldest child, so I had a lot of responsibility from a very young age. So I always was kind of like demanding, like, hey, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. I did a lot of the cooking from young, a lot of the cleaning, a lot of washing clothes and things like that. But I did see a lot very young too, because on my father's side, there was a lot of domestic violence. So I was like in that, like I was not the one being abused, but I was seeing it and very frequently. So I grew up with this thought that must be love, because even though there was domestic violence, they continued to be together. And whereas my mother, she dated people, but she never got remarried or anything like that. So my mother was a single mother. I grew up heavily with my grandfather. We lived with my grandfather from the time I was in the 5th grade. So it was a very unique lifestyle of like just growing up. But I went to like the inner city schools. I grew up in this area called Decatur in Georgia. That's where I went like middle school and high school, and in elementary school I spent in the inner city of Atlanta. So I just grew up in this way. I had to learn a lot for myself. I had to be very self-sufficient as a child. And I remember I knew very young that we didn't have a lot of money. Like I just knew from very young. So when I was about 10 and a half, and I'm thinking about it now because my daughter's like 10. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I was this age. And it's so funny because she is talking about entrepreneurship, but from a different perspective. For me, it was like, my mother don't really have it. She always said she ain't got it. My daddy always said he ain't got it. I got to start a business. So I remember being 10 and a half, and I went to my mother and I said, you know what? I want to start a babysitting business. She said, you got to be 11. I said, okay, bet. 11 years old, I was at my auntie house with her printer that had no ink. I printed out some flyers at 11. I typed on Microsoft Word, or it might have even been Word. It might have been Notepad, okay?
Oh, yeah, the Notepad.
And I said, babysitting. I ain't had no fee on it or nothing. That's just like, you can call. I think it might have been my mom's phone because I ain't had no phone. It was the house phone, and I can babysit for you at 11. And I remember my first client was my uncle and my auntie. They had me every weekend, and I mean, they paid me like $35, like literally for the whole weekend. I thought that was a lot.
When you're 11, that's like $100.
We're talking about over 10, 15 years ago, so that was like, that's a lot for me, especially nobody. I don't got no bills. What I'm doing, eating. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And that's just really where I just started to really see my potential, because being there, that was just such an integral part of my life. I saw the family structure. So I knew that it was a different type of family out there that could exist. And they really taught me like a lot about just daring to like dream and be creative. So then I started getting involved in youth advocacy work. So that's why I love what you all do, because my grandfather owned a nonprofit. And so they started a youth program, and I was one of the founding members of this youth council at this organization that still exists called Project South. And what we did was we went around the country and we facilitated workshops for other youth. So we would build the programs and do them. So if we want to do a workshop on gang violence, we would create this thing called popular education. We would create these activities that you interacted with creative works. So we were educating you, but we'll do like a Jeopardy on statistics around something, or we would do just a fun game, but then you could still learn at the same time. And we just talked about the things that really affected youth. So that's like kind of how I got my start before I entered into like going to college and really just start to have to navigate even further in my life. But I started off very like, I don't like what I see, and I'm going to do something different. And I knew this from a very just a very young age, and I was always very observant and quiet. So I was always the type to just look around and say, I see a problem. I think I want to solve it. I think I might want to solve that problem. So that's really how I got my start, just as a young person, like how I kind of just grew up and the things that I was exposed to. So I was, like I said, two sides of the fence. I saw this side and then I saw another side, and it was like, I got to figure out which side what am I going to do with my own life?
Right. So being that you was on both sides, you know, like people can look at, people always say like you're a product of your environment, but it can be something positive or it can be something negative. You know, it just depends on what you took from your environment. If we can go back to a little bit where you talked about maybe the inconsistency of like you're living with with your father for a visit, and you thinking that what was love is. Explain that, to like elaborate more on that. Like, at what point did you know, like, okay, so that's not love? Or how long did you feel like, this is what love is? So when you started to enter that stage of either dating or meeting guys or meeting, whatever, what was that experience like for you when you started to define like what love meant to you?
Yes. So actually, it's so funny because I literally recently wrote a book about this long journey. So for me, when I was from a young age, I thought that maybe you had to be hurt for it to be love, right? So if you love somebody, you have to prove it. So even if they hurt you, that means they love you because they care about you. If they're controlling, it's because they want to protect you. So that's how things were interpreted in my young mind. So that actually continued through middle school, through high school, until I was actually an adult. Actually, like I just really started going on a journey of healing and learning to love myself. I was over 25, right? It happened really in marriage where I was like, hold up, but we'll get to that, right? And so as a child, what I did was I just thought that this must be love. So I'm like, if they're not controlling, so I kind of started to attract men that were controlling. Like men, if I thought they were mean, or if they were mean, it's like, oh, they like me, because that's what they tell you, right? In elementary school, oh, he mean because he like you, and you don't know the impact that can have and how that follows you and how it shows up in everything that you do. So if you get the nice guy, you like, oh, they too nice. It can't be real. They ain't really that nice. That ain't the one I want. Huh?
I said, or you think they're gay. You're like,
or that, yeah. Or you think they get. It's
Mm-hmm.
like that. Those are two things. Like, oh no, they can't be nice. And then you always go for, I want the bad boy. But do you really? Like, do you really know what that life is like? I don't think it's an easy one. I don't think it's a good one either. But that is what we go after. We go after what we see, and that was me. So I was the girl like in high school. And I had a lot of insecurity and self-esteem issues because I was always bigger than the other girls in class. Now when I look back at the pictures, I'm like, girl, you was fine, right? But as a child, you taller than them, you got more hips, you bigger than them. It didn't necessarily mean that you overweight or anything. It just means you look different. So since you look different, either they wanted to talk to you behind the scenes, they wanted to be on what they used to call when we were in school, on the low, and they didn't want to see you in school, but they talked to you outside of school. So I accepted a lot of things that I would never like accept to this day. So it's that kind of love helped me accept a different type of abuse. Like the fact that you think you can talk to me at home, and then when I come to school, you act like I don't exist. That is not right, like in no way, shape, or form. But I thought it was love, right? And then I started to equate love as a thing that you couldn't have for yourself. So I started thinking somebody else has to give me the love, because I remember only a few times of like my mother saying the words, I love you. And we all have different love languages. So nobody talked about this when I was growing up. So my mother's love language was heavy in gifts. So she bought clothes, she bought this. It used to just be, for me, I was like, oh, you my mother, you're supposed to provide, right? But I soon learned as an adult, like, oh, that's her love language. So if I didn't buy her gifts, I understand she may not feel love. So I tried to do even better showing love to other people. But growing up, I was very much physical touch and words of affirmation. I need hugs, I need handshakes, I want somebody to love on me. And I got that a lot from my aunt and my uncle's house that I babysitted for. So my aunt would fulfill that space as a child. And we're like really, really close even now. So so for me, I dealt with a lot of men who it was just kind of like, oh, they want to have sex with me, they must love me, right? They gotta love me because they want to have sex with me, right? They want to feel on me, right? I just even remember, and when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh my God, I just can't imagine. I'm just so happy that I talk to my children because I'm like, I can't imagine. Like I just remember even being like 6th, 7th grade, boys want to feel on you, and you thinking that like they like you. No, there's something wrong with that. Right? It's something wrong with that. But these are the kind of things that I experienced and thought this must mean love. So I took that with me as I grew into adulthood, and even as I got into my story about how I'm even here, even having a story to share. I just remember when I had my first official boyfriend. Now note that I had all these boys that want to hide, but the first time I got a boyfriend that did not want to hide me, I was 17 years old, right? And he was not in school. He was older than me, but he not even that much. He was like a year older than me. But I spent a lot of time skipping school with him because he loved me. He went to school. Why should I? He lived down the street from me. And I was like, hey, he don't want to go to school. I'm going to go to school. When I did go to school, he would come walk to the school and walk me home. And I really thought that was just love because we had a very physical relationship until he started cheating on me. And I was like, wait a minute. I know y'all said love is supposed to hurt, but I don't think it's supposed to feel like this. Like this is devastating.
Yeah, you're like, this hurt.
Like this hurt. It's like girls walking to me saying they're pregnant. What? Hold up. This is a lot. And so to get revenge, I was like, I'm gonna go do somebody the same way now. Y'all done did it to me. I'm about to go get me about 5 boyfriends. I ain't sleeping with none of them, but I'm gonna go get all these boyfriends. And I'm gonna let y'all see what this feels like because this is hurting. But I realized that you're only hurting yourself, right? But I don't think it really came until I met this one guy. I know if I'm gonna have a question, but I'm just gonna go into my story a little bit, if that's okay. So I went to college. I actually went to HBCU for 1 year. So shout out to Tuskegee. Yay. I went to Tuskegee. I was graduating high school. And I had just finished breaking up, that breakup was forever. I broke up with this guy and I went to college, first year of college. And I was at a point where I was like, you know what? I've had a lot of fun in high school. I want to do right now. I promise do right now. I'm going to try to do better. I'm not nobody on campus. Tuskegee is small. You're not going to be talking about me in the streets. That's not happening. I'm not finna mess with nobody. They used to say locals. I'm not finna mess with no locals. Nope, none of that. If I mess with anybody, they're gonna be from Atlanta. So I met this guy in Atlanta. And I remember when I first met him, he think he might have had a girlfriend. So he was like, oh, okay, Mr. I got a girlfriend. So I left him alone. Then when he broke with his girlfriend, he came straight to me like, oh, I don't got no girlfriend no more. You know, we young. He was much older than me. Because that's the other thing that happens that sometimes we don't talk about that. When people your age treat you all kind of way, you'll start messing with older guys who are way too old to be your boyfriend, but they don't mind messing with you because they probably can't get nobody their age or nobody their age ain't gonna put up with they miss. So they come and find 18, 19-year-old girls and they're almost 30. So that's what was happening to me. So I started messing with this guy, and I just thought I was in love. I thought he was my boyfriend. When I think about it, I may not have been his girlfriend, but I thought he was my boyfriend. And it was just like we were just hot and heavy very early. And I remember one day I was like, okay, he kind of controlling. I don't like it. I think I'm an out controlling thing. I was like, I don't like this. And I was like, you know what? Somebody 2 weeks ago told me to come to this church. I think I'm gonna go to church. And he was just like, I ain't going to no church with you. I ain't going to no church. And I was like, well, it seems like I got a way of escape. I don't even know God at this point. Like I really had I knew God existed, but I had no relationship because I did not grow up in or anything like that. So I was like, I'm about to go to this church. So I went to the church And he went home. He was like, I ain't finna go to no church with you, blah, blah. I was like, all right, great. I can get away from you. So I went to the church, and believe it or not, I got saved that day. I had no idea, no intention. That was the day I got saved. And I got saved that day. Some time went on, me and him broke it off, but I went back to school for the second semester. He just kept like harassing me. You better not be pregnant. It ain't my baby. And I'm like, what is he talking about? And I'm like, you doing a whole lot. I ain't seen you. I ain't talked to you. I done moved on. Like, I'm good. And a few months later, I went to the health department just to get my regular testing done, because I had really came to that point where it's like, okay, Nakeisa, we're going to do something different. Like, you done went out here, you realize that all this stuff that you have been learning in high school and since middle school, like, it don't feel right. You don't like it. Let's get yourself together. Let's just go and get tested. Let's start over. Like, I'm saved now. I'm like, I don't want to have sex with anybody, because you get saved and, you get so on fire for God. You just want to do whatever God say do, right? You want to do whatever. You want to get your life together. Like, that's because I think sometimes when I first got saved, we just think life's gonna be perfect.
You get high. Yeah, you get like really high.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, life is gonna be so perfect now. I done found out about this. And I learned very fast. I had this testing done, and 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from a guy, and he said, has anybody told you your test results? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, note, I was about 19. I was very like my mouth was very like, why are you calling me? What you talking about? Ain't nobody calling about no test results. And I went into the office the next morning because he was like, you need to get there. You need to get here as soon as possible. I didn't even have a car. I had to borrow a car. I had to hop in the car with my friend because I had a license, but I really couldn't drive. Like, I'm just being honest. I really couldn't drive that good. I don't even know how I passed that test. So she had to drive me up there. And I went in, they swift me to the back. I could tell he was not a doctor. I don't know how they do things in Alabama, but that was not a doctor. And he was starting to read these test results, and he kept saying, this is negative and that's negative. And I'm like annoyed. I'm like, okay, if everything is negative, why am I here? And he paused and he said, your HIV results are positive. And immediately I just started crying. Immediately, it's like a wave of negative thoughts just take over your mind. Everything I had heard about HIV was now me at this point. So all I knew is that, okay, I'm probably about to die soon. And so as he's talking, I'm like, what is there to talk about? You just told me I'm going to die. Like, I know that's not what you said, but that's what I heard.
That's what I heard.
So I actually got up and walked out. I just got up and walked out. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And when I walked out, he chased me out, like, no, come back. He couldn't talk to me. And I just remember that first 2 weeks just being like this big blur. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I was coming or going. I was still trying to go to class, crying in class. My friends like, let's get out of here. You got to get out of this class. No, you can't sit here and cry all day, not knowing what was wrong with me. And I'm like, this is not life. And then I went to God. I was like, well, God, why would you save me? Like, that don't make no sense. If I was going to die, you could have just left me. Like, you should have just left me in the world. And honestly, if you would have left me in the world, we can just handle this a little bit different. But now I'm saved. So we're going to just handle this like whatever you say, because I don't know what to do at this point.
And it's like a real test of your faith at that point, because you're like, yeah. I just trusted you, God. And this is what you delivered.
It was a huge test, but I just felt like in that moment, he just started telling me, like, you're going to live. Actually, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to live now. And I was like, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. And he just started like telling all the stuff that I would do. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to do none of that. Like, I hear you, but yeah, I'm never going to tell anybody. I'm never going to start an organization. I'm never even going to speak. I'm an introvert. I don't even, and at this time I never talk. Like, I'm all very like, if you're my friend, I'll talk your ear off. But if we weren't friends, you probably never hear my voice, because I was so introverted, so quiet, because that's just how I felt. Like, I just came out like that, like very observant. Like, I don't want to talk. And so for me, it was just like, that was very life-changing. I know as a college student who was like, oh, life is future looks bright. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's not as bright as I thought it would be.
So did you, let's talk about when it happened, did you know, like, okay, who maybe you dealt with that, like, how did that ever come across your mind? Like, I need to find out, because at the
Well,
time you're thinking, who everybody I was with loved me, I trusted,
yeah.
so how did you, make that transition when you found out?
Yes. So one thing that I did know is that before I got tested, I had got tested a few months before that. So the only thing I did know about HIV is you were supposed to take a test. That's all I knew. So I was pretty up on testing because I had regular insurance. So every time I saw my doctor, they would just offer it to me, because this is when HIV testing was opt in, not opt out, which means that you had to opt in to take a test. Now it's like offered to you and you have to tell them you don't want it, which is opt out. So they would ask you, hey, you want to take an HIV test? You sign this paperwork. So I always would take it. So I knew from the last time I got tested that it was fine. Because since I had never got a call back, I called the doctor like, hey, if I was HIV positive, would you have told me? Like, I really wanted to know because I had never gotten a call back. So I knew in between time who the person that I had sex with. And when I went back to this person who I thought it was, he never came out and said, oh, it was me. But he gave me, it's just like I had this knowing, and he gave me a very strong impression that it was him, but he never like admitted that it was him. So that is how I knew. And also I just knew based off of time frames and what happened and how he was acting. Like, it was a lot of signs. So that is how I'm about 99% sure. I won't say 100 because he never said it. But I do share more about like exactly what happened in my story, in my books and stuff like that. But that is how I knew. It's a whole other thing about all this trial and error and the different things that happened between us, because there was, during our relationship, I guess I'll keep it like this. During our relationship, there was a time where there was an unwanted encounter between the two of us. And it was highly suggested based off of me talking to the doctors that this is probably how it happened to me. And that is when I knew. So it was confirmed in that way. So that was the other part of the story, having to deal with somebody you think you love and they're saying, oh, it's your boyfriend, and not really understanding that your boyfriend can sexually assault you and rape you.
Yeah.
And that was really, so on top of getting a diagnosis, I also had to deal with that because I really didn't think that your boyfriend could rape you. I thought that, if you start off a sexual encounter and you say yes in the beginning, even if in the middle you say no, you said yes in the beginning, right? So I didn't even process that was wrong till maybe a year or so later. Like, it took me a while to process that was wrong, because here I am, a young girl who from 6th grade has been touched on by boys, thinking that this is okay, thinking that touch was good. And even if it was unwarranted or maybe you did not want it, somebody was paying you attention. And sometimes I think that's also, like, now we live in a time where this big Me Too movement, and you still even get the backlash. You could come out and say, somebody touched me 10 years ago. Why you ain't saying nothing 10 years ago? Did it not take away the fact that it still happened?
Mm-hmm.
Does it take away that, like, you don't like to live with that shame, and then not even understanding in your young mind? Because I believe that we think our brains are fully developed at 18 and 19 years old, and they're not. They're still developing. Yeah. We think 12-year-olds have fully developed brains. They're not fully developed. So what I know as a 32-year-old is a whole different world than what I knew at 19 years old. Yeah. And having that understanding.
Yeah. And there's always a lack of education when it comes to that, because, even to this day, as a lot of the men that I know, they don't go get checked out. With every woman I've been with, they clean, I trust them. It's like, but you don't know them, so it is scary, especially as a woman, because I can only imagine the feeling, because I know when I go get my, my yearly checkup, they always say, do you want to get a full panel? Do you want to get all your blood taken? Do you want to do? And it's like, yeah, but no, but that waiting period to get your results back, you're like, and so I remember them calling me, and then I missed the call and I call back, but you automatically start thinking, what would, I mean, the thought starts going through your head like, okay, if I don't hear nothing, I'm good. But then when you do hear them, you're like, why are you calling me? But sometimes it's like, oh, I just want to let you know everything was good. I'm like, well, shit, like, you don't, but it's still scary because you just think like he allowed you to have one more good test. That's how I always think. You have one more good test, and it's like you just never know. And with the lack of, like you talk about men, and just what love is, people are just getting in relationships and they like different women, and so she looked good, she looked clean, so everybody just raw dogging and it's just doing all kind of stuff because nobody's really going to get checked out. It's almost like some men put the responsibility on women, like she should be clean. Like she don't know that,
and women don't know. That's the thing. Like women don't even show symptoms for a lot of like chlamydia and gonorrhea. Women sometimes don't show symptoms at all, and you can't just assume because they went. Because I think this is the assumption: you went to the doctor, you had to go get tested.
Exactly. So if you have something, it's your responsibility to let me know. And if nobody's let you know, that means they're good. And so people just have that trust relationship. And it's like, I know men who have multiple women they've slept with. And when I ask them, like, well, have you ever went to the doctor? Have you went to get tested? Like, I know the women were clean. It's like, you don't know.
Then to even say that word clean, that is not even the right word. Because am I dirty? Because I have HIV? No.
Right.
That is not the determinant.
And what is clean? Like what is clean? What is dirty? Like clean means like you have something you can hear. Like do you have something but you can't see it? Like what? Yeah, that's a bad word, but that's what people say. Hey, everybody what I treat they're clean, or so it is scary. Now because people don't really build those relationships.
Ultimately, it comes down to like you were just saying, Nakeisa, is the accountability. You can't just automatically put it on her, and you shouldn't assume that she's going to put it on you. Like you have a conversation, and both of y'all are like, look, we both need to go make sure we good before we get into this, because it's only respectful. Now, so many people, especially in today's day, where so much is I don't even know how to properly phrase it, but there's so many areas of life that are being more and more acceptable. People are feeling like they can move so much more freely and not really think about the consequences of some of their movements. And ultimately, we have to really look at not just is she clean, is he clean, are we good to do what we're about to do, but what are the potential long-term ramifications if. And that's the thing that none of us think about. I ain't gonna say none, but most don't think about when going into having any type of intimate situations with whoever. Like, what would the long-term effect look like? Let's say you're a parent. Like, how good of a parent, how much value as a parent are you going to be in the long term if you're dealing with XYZ? Because you put yourself in that situation right here and now. So, it's just ultimately just accountability and stop trying to put it on the next person. Now,
everybody has a part in it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just listening to, and I'm picturing when you say you heard he gave you the news and you just walked out, like I'm visualizing this. And I'm like, dang, like I probably would do the same thing. So from then to getting to where, you said, all right, guy, I'm just gonna do it your way. I mean, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, what can I do? Like, what was that transition like for you? Obviously, the spiritual component had to be part of the core of it. But a lot of times that's what people throw in their towel on their faith. So how did your mental stay strong enough to push you to continue to go through and eventually get to where you're advocating for others and not only for your continual, growth in the space?
Yes. So for me, I spent a lot of time just really going deeper about working on myself. So before I found out the news, I had already made a decision that I wanted to live a different life. So I first dealt with my emotional and mental health. So I did tell a few people that I was really already close to. So like my aunt that I mentioned, she was like one of the first people that I told. And I told my mentor actually.
And what did they say when you first told them?
So my mentor, I don't remember her first reaction. I just remember I was so in the daze. I just remember she took some time and then she called me back and she was like, I needed a minute to process. And then she was a big source of support because her mother was a nurse. So she told me what vitamins I need to be taking to keep my immune system up, because medication was different back then. You didn't have to take treatment unless your numbers hit a certain level. And my numbers were good, so your immune system strong. And she was very supportive, but she was very shocked in the beginning. My aunt, she probably cried because she's super, super emotional. But she tried her best to be supportive in those few months, because I told them like within weeks of finding out. Because like I said, if we're close, you're gonna know what's going on with me. So I told them, but I was in school too. I was still in Alabama. So anybody close to me, my roommate knew because she to the appointment. So immediately she found out. And I think it's so crazy now because me and her are now like have been a source of support for each other, because eventually she unfortunately ended up with like she got herpes. So now she does herpes advocacy work. And I was able to like support her after she supported me first. So but when it comes back to your question, what it took, I was close to them, but the first thing I did was I did a lot of research. Like I was like, I hear you what you're saying, because one thing I did not know at this time is that everybody don't hear God like I do. So God was speaking to me very early, and I'm just grateful that I can like hear it in that way. And I think that also helped me not make it so easy to throw in the towel, because I understand everybody doesn't hear the same way that I hear. So I was like, well, I'm real smart, so I'm gonna use this brain. I'm gonna go do some research, because if you said I'm gonna live, that means what I heard about HIV must not be real. It must not be as what exactly like I heard, because all I had heard was that you're gonna die. That's all I had heard. So I was like, maybe what I heard ain't right. So let me go research it. So I literally went to the computer lab at my school, and I remember having a red folder. And I mean, I printed papers like I was doing a research project. I printed so much information. I found online forums where people could talk about HIV anonymously. I found all these websites that had all this information. And I started to realize, like, wait a minute, it's not just me. Because I was a young African-American girl from the South, where we don't talk about HIV in the South. We the Bible Belt, but you don't talk about sex. You don't tell nobody you got HIV, girl. You don't do that. So I had to do a lot of research. So I went, and as I found more about the truth, I stopped like my self-stigma, which me having negative feelings about my own self started to ease up off of me. Like, wait a minute, according to this, I can live. Wait a minute, treatment is amazing, even at that point. And this is over 10 years ago. And I'm like, wait a minute, they got all these studies about what they're doing, the new stuff that's coming out. Oh, you can have kids. I didn't know you could have kids. Like all these things that I didn't know. And I'm like, nobody's talking about this. This is not what they tell you. They're not telling the truth. And that's when I first realized, like, oh, people be lying. Like they lied. Like this is not the truth. It's like it was a very like a scare tactic, which scaring people is not gonna stop them from having sex. It's just gonna stop them from getting tested.
Right. But you can take it either or. Like you can almost think of it as like it gives hope to those who are diagnosed, but it also sends a message to people that you can continue to live a careless life, because you know what I'm saying? Like you can continue, you can just do whatever because you can still live. So people may take that as like, oh, so I can still, but it's like you still should be taking precaution of your health and what you're doing. But it's almost like what people can do with that actual information. But it does give hope to people, because I remember when it was like, was it Magic Johnson? It was like a big thing. And then all of a sudden it was like, everybody's like waiting for him to die, like, when is he gonna leave? Like, it was like he kept living and he kept looking healthy. So people were like, well, did he really have it? So it's just that being ignorant to what it really means.
Yeah, and I think that people have their own personality. So even if you like, you can share, like I advocate, right? And I share my life, and people still say, well, I'm still gonna protect myself and I'm still gonna get tested. And then there are people who, it's just like, especially young people, Bridget, they're just not wired like that. So even if you share the truth, or if you don't share the truth, neither tactic works, because they try abstinence only education in Georgia and people still have sex. People try to avoid the sex conversation with their children, saying, if you have sex, you're gonna have a baby. Even they, they say friends
Well,
have
I grew up like that. Like, no, don't touch me. Like,
yeah, like you
I
have
may hunch, but we
yeah,
ain't doing the real thing because I am not
yeah,
trying to get pregnant. My
no,
mom is
yeah,
going to kill me.
yeah. And so that worked for some people, but then other people, like I think about my sister, she had a baby, and we don't have. She was technically my stepsister, but I've been knowing her since I was 3. So her mother didn't play that, and she still had a baby at 16. It didn't stop her, right? So I think that it depends on the person, but I think no matter which way you try to share this story, people gonna do what they want to do when it comes to that. Because people who do things, so this is for people who do think, well, I could just be careless because if I get HIV, whatever. No, 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 no. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Like, it's so much more that you have to deal with and go through. It's things that you don't understand. You got to understand. Like, I'm talking about it freely, but stigma is it's a disease. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. People don't understand it. Do you not understand? I did research on this, and it's like less than 2% of people, based off this research, believe that people living with HIV should have children. They believe that it's being selfish. Like, you gotta understand that. But you also gotta understand this. A lot of women find out they have HIV while they're pregnant. So then what are they gonna do? They're finding out in pregnancy.
And so can you educate us more on that? Like what it means for a woman to be diagnosed and still have a child? Like what are the chances of the child, do the child automatically have it? Like what is the information with that? Because I think that's definitely something that we lack in that area.
Yeah, so there's something called U equals U, which means undetectable equals untransmittable. So HIV, it makes HIV unable to be transmitted through sex, but it also helps you decrease the chances significantly of your baby having HIV to less than 1%. Without treatment, it was already under 25%. So when the baby is in the womb, it does not cross the blood-brain barrier. So HIV, they'll come out with the antibodies. Antibodies are the cells, antibodies are what you create to try to fight a virus. But with HIV, the antibodies don't work. So that's what they test. When they test you, they're looking for the antibodies that your body forms when you come in contact with HIV, but they don't do anything to the virus. Your body just creates them because they're there. So that gets passed, but not the actual virus. And then they put things in place. So like while a woman is having a baby, they put them on an IV infusion of HIV medications. The woman takes treatment so they can get to that undetectable level. And then they put the baby on a round of treatments to continue, because there's something called post-exposure prophylaxis, means you get exposed with HIV. You can take medicine to prevent it from converting to you being actually diagnosed. So although the baby does not have the virus, they do that as a prevention strategy after the baby is born and the baby continues to get tested. So there are a lot of things in place. That's why also another thing that I just want to stress is that if you are pregnant, make sure they're testing you twice, during prenatal and at delivery. Because it takes, now some tests can show your HIV results within 30 days now, but most tests are 3 to 6 months. So if you took it, say in month 2 of pregnancy, it may have said negative, right? But you got 8 more months. So you want to make sure they test you at delivery. So that if there is something, not saying that it is, if there is, they can take the necessary precautions.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to pass this to your children. You don't have to do that. And I just think that
you not to do that extra step and find out something later that now it's like it's too, you can't really do what you could have done before to prevent that. So wow.
So so that is it has when I was diagnosed, this is the kind of things they were doing, but it has changed tremendously. Like when I say it's like almost mind blowing, the transformation of just treatment and the different modalities and things like that. But you do, as a woman living with HIV, we have to be mindful that our OBGYNs know how to care for women living with HIV. We have to be mindful that we're seeing actual infectious disease doctors. We got to make sure we have the right care team
Yeah.
to take care of us, because there's just another layer. Now, I'm not saying like, honestly, you look at my immune system, it's very strong and things like that. And a lot of us have really strong immune systems. But we also just want to make sure we're doing our part even after a diagnosis, and that
Yeah.
we're managing like our stress and things like that. We're managing our time, because there is a chronic illness, and it's always with you. Like, I'm pretty healthy. I take my medicine like I should. I believe in divine healing, but I do it. I do my part in this whole thing. But I also want to make sure that I am taking care of myself externally, like making sure I'm eating right. Like, I got an exercise routine and just really being overall healthy, because it doesn't give me a right to say, well, I got my treatment in life. No,
Yeah.
I still want to do my part and make sure that I'm like taking care of my body just overall, if that makes sense.
So I have two questions for you. One question, there's, if you can, not, well, one question and one statement. There is a stigma within the Black community about, only Black gay men get AIDS, or HIV or whatever. So, I do want to talk about that, because obviously that's not true. And then the second thing, if you can just speak on what dating was like once you found out, like you meet somebody, he likes you, you like him, and now you like, oh, and by the way, so is that something, how is that first experience? Because it's like, you don't want to say it in the beginning because you don't know how that person's going to take it, but you don't want to wait. So can you talk about how that experiments was with you? And then also, if you could talk about, the stigma of only Black gay men, get diagnosed.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the dating part. So I would like to say first that dating is just hard. It's hard, right? So for me, I had to find a way, like it was two ways I had to do it. So the first time I ever disclosed to a guy, I remember I met him, like, I'm in Atlanta, the Martyrs, our subway. So I met him on Martha. He was just so cute. And we was like hanging out for like 2 days and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I would never do that now. Well, we was just hanging out for a couple days. And I was like, I got to tell him about this. And I don't know how I'm going to tell him. But I called him on the phone and I told him. And he was like, he asked all these questions and then he just never called again. And I was like, oh, man. That's messed up. He was kind of cute. I kind of liked him. And so I was like, well, let me just try another way. So what I did was I started telling people, like, so not too long after we met. And some people didn't care and some people did. And I was like, wait a minute, you know what? I'm going to start telling people when I think I kind of like them and it might actually go somewhere. Because now I feel like all these people walking around with my information in their pocket. And I don't like them. I don't even like you. I just was trying to see something. So for me, I really started to really change my mindset that I'm just not looking for somebody because it's still that same like journey of learning how to love myself. So it's like, I'm just not looking for somebody that just want me. I want somewhere it's mutual. You like me, I like you, and we can build something from this. So for me, I just always, when I disclose, I first make sure I was good with myself. Before I just was like, I'm gonna disclose somebody, because even dating, you have to make sure you're ready to date, right? So if I'm not ready to date, I'm not worried about disclosure in that moment because I'm not ready to date no way. But when I got to that place where I was ready, it was kind of like, okay, I'm ready. So sometimes I would test them and maybe bring up a story or a movie that talks about HIV to see if they say anything crazy. And people have said crazy stuff, and I was like, okay, I'll never tell you. Like, I remember one time this guy was like, it was stuff in the bed. It could have been a needle or something. My child could have got AIDS. And I was like, oh yeah, I ain't never telling you. We can end. Like, it's no need to me even to still be around you, because I feel the stigma from your voice. Like, I know there's no need for me to tell you, but I always told, when I got to that place, I was like, you know what? I might want to date this person. I kind of like this person. I'm gonna go ahead and tell them, and go if they don't like this, then they know now, and they can know now and they can move forward. But if they're still willing, then we can move forward and we can date or talk and see what happened. And all of them didn't work out. Only married one person, one man, right? But I've had long-term relationships. I've had a lot of different people that I've dated. So for me, I was just make sure I tell at a time that was good for me. Now, disclosure works differently for every person. And like who they're dating and things like that. So it works differently. But I always, my number one tip is just make sure that you're confident and good, secure with yourself, because you never know what they're going to say. And disclosure is bigger than just dating. You never know what your friend's going to say. You never know what your mama going to say. So, but you have to make sure that you know you are confident in yourself, and it might hurt, right? If they reject you, that's okay. Cry, get it out. You don't have to act like it didn't hurt. It hurts. I've been rejected several times.
I'm like, hey, you ain't fine anyways. You're like,
yeah, they do.
You really like me, but you just mad, but that's okay. Like you said, the first step to healing is just acknowledging, like, hey, I'm hurt. That situation hurt me, but that's how you grow from that, being able to say that's how you feel and not just saying like, I didn't care anyways. Cause it's like, well, the reality is that you do care. So stop saying that you don't.
Yeah, that's why you're saying you don't care, because you do care, because you don't need to announce that you don't care. You just move on.
Right.
So that's how it worked for me. But dating is just hard overall. But I'm gonna be honest, I hope this comes off the right way. It's not as hard as people make it seem. There are actually more, I guess, because of the education, and most people that was cool with it, they did ask to be educated, right? They did ask questions. They did want to understand.
Did that get annoying? Like you trying to go out and have brunch and everybody's like, so like, how do you feel? How, do you ever feel like, okay, I don't want this. I know this is a part of my life, but I don't feel like I want to talk about it like
all the time. Yeah.
I actually feel like that.
Actually, no. Most people forget like a lot. Like literally, people just forget. They be like, "Oh yeah," because it's not like I'm going every day. Like even like, so I share my story publicly. I got books and things like that. But when I'm walking down the street, I'm not like, "Girl, I'm the HIV girl." Hey, that's not how I leave my HIV. That's a part of my life, and I didn't share. The reason I share my story is because besides the pressure God put on you to do what you're supposed to do.
And he'd be wrong for that. He'll put you all the way out there and just make you feel bad. He'd be like, dang.
But the other thing was, I was like, I've been living with this. I've been living with HIV for years, and I don't know no other woman living with HIV. Mm-hmm. And I said, that can't be right. I said, that ain't right. I said, something not right about that. I said, it got to be more people. It got to be more. It has to be. Like, it's no way.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was telling Brian that before you got on. I said, I've only heard about, people. You see people that have it, or, but I was like, you are the first person that I can say, hey, I know someone. Like, you don't doesn't become real until you're like, oh, it is for real. Like, it's not just something you see on TV at the gay parade. You're like, no, there's women out here too, straight women,
Yeah, and there's a lot of African American female advocates that are in my same age range. So many that are doing the work in different areas. And it's all because we all have a desire to encourage those that are living with HIV, but also to stop another person from doing it, thinking that this life is glamorous. It's not. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm glad that you said that about straight, because I think it's a good segue to your second question. So about this stigma, thinking that only Black gay men have it. Back in the day, it was only a white man's disease. So the thing is, when you think about I want to make sure I say the right word. When you think about transmission, that's the word I'm looking for. Transmission. The number one way of transmission is through anal sex. Because it's easy to tear, all this kind of stuff. I won't go into detail, but that's the number one way. So that's why you see more gay men living with HIV. Or let me not even say their names wrong. Listen, because nobody don't come for me if they see this. Like, you said it wrong. It's MSM. It's men who have sex with men, because some of these men don't identify as gay, right?
And I was going to say that you do have a lot of men, and I have met some where if they grew up in the South or in the church, they kind of in that denial stage, or they kind of playing with fire, like, I sleep with men, but I don't, like I do men, but men don't do me, so I'm not gay. That people start kind of flip flopping, or they're they have a woman, but they really messing with a dude. I've had friends that have experienced that. And that's the scary part of dating, because nobody's really saying the truth. And so you may think you with a straight man. Just because he played football and he lift weights doesn't mean that he's straight, So those conversations, like you're saying, when you're dating, is like, nowadays this is not the time to have conversations like, so what you like to do on the weekends? So what's your favorite color? Who's your favorite football team? Like, those questions are cool, but you really should be asking, like, when's the last time you've been tested? Have you ever thought about, have you ever been with a man? Have you ever, like, those you really should be asking, because this is not, we don't live in a time and age where it's like, okay, well, you can just dip and dab and nobody really, but people still not having those conversations. Everything is still very surface level. So it was like, oh, she fine. And she funny too. She's super cool. It's like, you know nothing about that woman's life. Nothing what she's doing. Same thing with the woman, oh, he's nice. He always calling me. He's always here. It's like,
you let the flesh attract you. And then it's like, I don't even want to think about what could go wrong, because I want to focus on the good right now. And then after that orgasm and that you snap back into your senses, oh, dang, what did I just do? Like, ain't good here. And it's only after the fact that you really think about what should be happening or what you should have done. But that's just that thing, and you made reference to it earlier. Instant gratification, like the world that we're living in right now, like you want that satisfaction right here, right now. But sometimes you got to slow down. You got to slow down before you speed up and jump into the sack, because you never know what's going to happen. But, as we
talk about men and you say sack.
I'm from the South, girl.
I'm like, sack.
When you jump into sack,
I thought about balls when you said sack. I was like, sack. And I was like,
when you jump into
the sack, I was like, we got
yeah, but that's the thing.
I'm not from the South. Y'all two are, so that's why y'all knew that.
Yeah,
so funny.
And like it's just, this is such needed conversation. I would say this is the first show that we've had that we went this deeply in the the sexual and all the different spider webs of the sexual space. But it's one of those things that so many of us need to get more comfortable talking about. If you look at relationships, marriages, there's three things that typically break up marriages, and it's a lack of, one of them is communication, period. And then the other two is conversation around money and conversation around sex. What are your expectations before you get into this relationship? What are the standards that you have in all of these areas? And until you actually have a serious conversation around those, you're probably going to end up messing up one way or another. So sometimes we got to pump the brakes before we try to pump something else.
Yeah.
I don't know why, like everything you say, I don't know, because this conversation has turned into sex. I'm like, pump.
Yeah, that's I was like, Lord,
why does my mind keep going to something different? Like, that is not what he's saying. I keep like, you gotta pump on, like pump what? Like,
yeah. I mean, you gotta.
He did though. He said he did.
Yeah, pun intended. Sometimes.
He meant a pun on that one.
Sometimes people, like, that's the only or the best way to get people to open up and talk about things like this, is throw a little humor in there. And it's so important, and it's a conversation I'm going to have to make sure I'm having more frequently, because I got a 13-year-old son. And and these days even back in the day, started super early. He's got a little girl that he talks to, but she is way on the other side of the country. So I'm like, okay, keep talking to her. Let her stay over there for now, at least. And until the time comes that I feel you're mature enough to be able to take that to another level, y'all can stay where y'all are. But still a conversation that definitely needs to be had on a regular basis.
Yes, that's so true. And it's just so different. Like people used to be really far away. Now they're so close. Even though it's coming up, we had MySpace, they people still felt far away. But now, like, it's so many platforms. Like, and I just don't know. And people, they're just so exposed to so much. Like they got Instagram pages you don't know about. And you like, what are you doing? They got, they got TikToks you don't know about. At least they think you don't know about. And and it's like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Like this was just like it wasn't so like in your face, but it
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah.
It's very much in your face, and kids know things. Like my daughter asked me that. She said, "Do you know what TMZ is?" I was like, "What you know about TMZ? You 10. What you know about TMZ?" And she's like, "Oh, my grandmother watches it." So she watched it at her mother's house. She's like, "Oh, my grandmother watches it." And I'm like, "Oh, well, TMZ is none of your business."
Right. You're like, you need to be watching Disney Channel. You come on some TMZ.
I know something else, not no TMZ. And I was like, Lord, what is going on?
So can you talk about just because it's kind of like, so when you decided to be an RN, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like, how's she gonna be a nurse? Like, it's like people have these ideas in their head, like, is that something that you have to number one, you have to disclose that when you're like going to be a nurse and getting a job? Because I know like they may ask criminal records, stuff like that, but I'm sure depending on certain jobs you go, they ask certain questions, like, pre-qualifying questions. So is that something that they talk about? And then, have you ever had an experience where someone's like, she had HIV and she a nurse at school? Like, is that, it's supposed to be, you know what I'm saying? Like that what people think, like, it's like somebody being super out of shape, but being a trainer, it's like, well, how's she gonna
so honestly, so for me, I actually didn't think I could. But HIV is covered under the Disabilities Act. And I can't give you HIV from being a nurse, right? So you can, they have things where, like, of course, you get needle stick, you can get the testing and all that kind of stuff, but that's not. So that's how that worked. I just got to clear with my doctor. I filled out every paperwork that we was supposed to do, and went from there. So was not ever open with my status with people, if that makes sense. Just with the people who need to know. So it was kind of because it's under the Disabilities Act. So it's like if you got a disability, you don't have to go around saying, "Hey, this is what's going on with me." But I did protect it myself and things like that when it came to that. So I was always safe, but it's standard precautions. Like you have to be safe with everybody because you assume everybody got HIV when you work at the hospital. Right. Because some people.
So have you ever ran across someone like that you were, caring for that maybe they just found out, or like, you know what I'm saying? Have you ever had any kind of experience like that where, as a nurse that you came across someone that experienced finding out for themselves for the very first time and you being in the room? Have you ever had that type of, what was that like?
So yes, I have actually a couple of times. But I was just able to be a source of like encouragement. And also I was able to help get resources for the actual, like if they needed resources outside the hospital, I knew all resources was at because I made sure I was up, and so I could help in that way. That was always helpful. But then also, even as an advocate, I hear stories more now than when I was a nurse, than when I worked at the bed. So I'm still a nurse, but I don't work at the bedside anymore. But before I heard more stories outside of work because, of course, I'm very public with it. So people would come to me. But one thing that I love about my story in nursing, when people read my book as nurses, they just had a greater level of compassion with people who had illnesses that you could not see. So even if it was mental illness and things like that, like depression or bipolar, they just had another level of compassion. But after they read, so they had a level, say their compassion level was super high. It went even higher after they read my story because you have all these thoughts about HIV and AIDS. And then you meet somebody living with it and you see how they live their life and you're like, wait a minute, it's not what I thought. I even remember one time I went to the hospital and I was sick. and it was so unrelated to my HIV, right? And she was like, well, on paper, it looked bad. But when I saw you, you look great. So I'm gonna let you go home. And I just looked at her. I was like, that's why I guess we can't judge by paper, huh? And you was gonna let me go home anyway, because I'm not staying here. Like I work, I'm a nurse. I'm not gonna stay here. I'm gonna go home. I think I could do better there. So yeah, that's another way that I kind of dealt with some of the stigma, but I never really ran into like a problem, but I was always a source of information and encouragement, and was able to like help other nurses and help other people as a nurse. But I did that for everybody. Like I love I love being a nurse. Like it was just it was literally, I never wanted to be one, just want to say that. But when I became one, I was like, oh, wow, I'm actually good at this. So.
It's when you think about just your journey, I mean, it's still mind blowing, because everything that you thought something is, it's you're seeing a different person, and it's like what we're taught is not real. It's like it's like, oh my God, look how many years we've been misled, like with information. Here I'm 40 years old, and I'm like just now learning, like, really, like never knew, because you don't talk about it in schools, you don't talk about it in church. You sure the hell ain't gonna be talking, it's not like you and your girlfriend sit around and be like, yeah, girl, so what would you do if, nobody's talking about it. So it's like, it's just crazy, because it's like, it's almost like you said before, when you're like, I never met a woman that had HIV, besides me. Like, you feel like you're out here in the world alone, and there's thousands of other women that have it, and men. But it's like, and people living these lives that nowadays where everybody is a freak and everybody doing this, and they got 2 or 3, 4 people doing the same time. Because I know when I moved here to Houston, I mean, I got here and I had so many couples that would come to me and be like, and women be like, you're really pretty. I'd be like, oh, thank you. And they'd be like, yeah, this is my husband. I'd be like, hi, nice to meet you. And they're like, so we want to know, and that's the first time I ever heard, who the hell is we? You know what I'm saying? I don't hang out with people's husbands. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, we want to know, like, if you ever want to hang out with us. It's like, oh, hell no. But I was just thinking, like, that's the kind of life people are doing. More women to keep relationships with their men. They're trying to make themselves feel like they open to, us doing something different, and it's like, you may think that's saving your relationship, but right now, with people not being educated on things that are out there and what's going on with your bodies and how to die, and then men not getting tested, they don't go to the doctor unless they're dying, they don't go. So it's like, you out here thinking you a freak and you looking real cute, but it's like, you don't know, with that person, you bring me in a bedroom with you and your husband, you don't know what my life was like before you met me. I could have done something else with somebody who has something, that has somebody, and you worried about how fine I am, and you bringing me home to your whole family, so nobody's having those conversations, and it's so scary, because I know that, dating, I used to ask those questions, like, so have you ever thought about, being with a man? He'd be like, no, you usually know by like the way a man react. Oh, hell no. You'd be like, okay, well, you cool then. But then you have son to be like, well, and I've had son to say they have. And I was like, but it was like, I was a little more straightforward when I was in my 20s. So I was like, I don't care. Like, cause I don't like you like that anyway. So I would need to know everything that you got. You having, you having a little too many fips for me. So I'm thinking something wrong with you. So it's like, I would ask more questions, but nowadays, people don't ask, because they assume if that person has something, or if that person has something going on, they would tell me. It's like, you don't know that. You don't know what that person tell you. Nobody's willing to walk around and be like, oh, by the way, guess what guess what I was diagnosed with, because we're so uneducated in those areas and misled by information that it's like you said, you say that to somebody, well, I have HIV, and it's like, oh, hell no. But we don't know. So it's almost like you can't blame people for being like, oh, because we don't know. now that you speak and you're teaching people and educating, now as you come across somebody that may have something or whatever, you can educate yourself on like, oh, well, I know I can't get it from you. Or I know that, that person could say, okay, well, are you taking your treatments? How often are you taking your treatments? Do you mind taking it in front of me? Whatever y'all have to do to create that safe place for your relationship, I feel like that's so important. But we're so misled with the information. And like I said, when people live in these lifestyles now where it's like, I want a freak. I want to, you got girls with their boyfriends, and I got, you got men that like other men to come in with them and their girlfriend. It's like, it's really dangerous, when you're starting to play like that, because we living in a society, like I said, where we're misled, we're misinformed, and then now the more, quote unquote hoes you got, the more important you are. And then women are willing to do anything because, you talked about the physical abuse, but there's mental abuse as well, and so people, whenever you're having an emotional conversation with somebody, even if you're intending not to be with them, that's still a relationship being built because there's trust. This person's thinking you're telling them the truth. You're thinking that you're telling, they think you're telling the truth. And so now you're building this relationship like, oh, I really like her. She's cool. Or I really like him. He's cool. But you know nothing about him. You know nothing about her. You're assuming that because they're cool or because they always seem straight up or they always seem 100, that they would just come out and tell you. But that's not something you want to come out and tell somebody. And you, like you said, you may not want to tell them in the beginning. You might wait till you already in the bed and be like, oh yeah, by the way. So it's like, you have to really be careful these days when you're just looking at everything from a surface level, because you know nothing about that person's backstory. So it's, when we talk about in the Black community, every time we talk about HIV or AIDS, we're talking about gay men.
Yeah.
And
you gotta stop.
And so like, men that are straight are like, well, shit, I ain't gay, so it ain't me. And then women thinking my man ain't gay, so we good. But it's like you have no idea, who your man slept with, what woman your man slept with, that maybe the man that she slept with, maybe he was gay, or maybe he had it. And the girl that he slept with, he didn't know, and now he sleeping with you, so you don't know. And I just think it's really scary and it's really sad because here I am now at 39, and all this stuff that you said, I mean, I never thought to educate myself to this extent, because you're like, well, I don't really have to do that right now. But you really should be informing yourself on a consistent basis, even if it doesn't apply to you, because you just never know if it happens to you or somebody in your circle of, circle of influence. Now you can educate somebody on what happens, if you are diagnosed. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that, because it's just mind blowing. And it's like, oh my God, everything I learned about HIV or AIDS is like, not good information. And we pass it on to other people. You know what I'm saying? Like we all just be passing on this shit to everybody. Like, yeah, girl, you ain't gotta worry about that because I heard that Magic Johnson, like that's not you. That's real information.
Yeah, and it's like you don't know Magic Johnson's life outside of the pictures. Like a picture. So if you see Magic Johnson, like if I take a picture right now, I smile. You only can see this. You don't know what else going on in my house. You don't know what's going on down the street. Like I got like 5 kids running through my house right now. Like, did you know that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't know what's going on. Like even when people see me advocating, like, oh, you're so strong, you're so this, you're so that. You only know when I show up how you think I am. Right? And that goes back to when people think, well, you just take a pill a day. Okay. You don't understand that 1 in 4 people living with HIV have a mental illness too. Right? You don't understand what it's like to live a day in my life or in another person's life. Now, everybody doesn't suffer from mental illness. You don't know what it's like. What if, like, I'm blessed that I'm undetectable, but 48% of women living with HIV are not. They're not getting to that level. You're not guaranteed that all the medicine options will work for you, because viruses can have resistance. It's a virus. So there's so many other factors, and it's like, it's 100% preventable. Like there's so many ways to prevent HIV. Condoms still work. You can even take something now called PrEP.
Nobody's using those. They must throw those in the trash. Because it's a trust. Now it's an honest system. Like You feeling me, I'm feeling you, so we good, right?
Yeah, like, yeah, no. Like I'm feeling you, you feeling me, but you know what? I done educated myself now. I'm a little bit wiser now, and I feel like we need to do this. And then we got to stop saying that it's this group of people. That's stigma. Even people are find out in marriage. It's unfortunate. They get married. They say, I did it the right way. I waited. I got married. And then unfortunately, it was their partner who didn't say. Right? So we have to get this image that we've painted out of our heads about what HIV looks like, or who is, these are the only people. We just celebrated 40 years of knowing what HIV was. So long-term survivors day was June 5th. 40 years. So this virus is literally 40 years old. So some people that are living are older than we've known about this virus. So over time, things have changed a lot. And what we know, and when they used to find out, it was just everybody had already progressed to AIDS, so they didn't even know what it was. So we still have this image of going in the bubble suits, touching people. We still have this image, and some of us still think AIDS is HIV, and it's not. People think you can catch AIDS, you can't. HIV
So
is the virus.
can you talk about AIDS and HIV? Like,
Yeah, I can tell you it's real quick. So HIV is the virus that can progress to AIDS. AIDS is a syndrome. I always mess the letters up. So I'm not even going to try to say it right now. But AIDS is a syndrome of illnesses that can come when your immune system is weakened by the virus HIV. Right? You don't, like, I have not progressed to AIDS. It's based off a number, your CD4 count going under 200 is the numbers now. But my CD4 count is like over 1,000. It's really high. It's probably higher than people who don't take treatment. And we all have CD4 cells. Those are your fighter cells in your immune system that fight for you when you come in contact with a virus or bacteria or something like that. So you can't go say, oh, you're going to catch AIDS. First of all, you don't catch it. It's transmitted, but it's HIV. So it's not AIDS. AIDS is a syndrome that can come as the progression of HIV, and it usually comes untreated. So you can come in contact with HIV and get a positive result. Don't take a test, you don't know, and then you can be fine you'll feel fine for about 10 to 12 years or so with no treatment, and then you'll start getting sick, and then you'll find out that all these years. So it doesn't lie dormant. There's another myth. It doesn't lie dormant. You're just asymptomatic. But if you was to go take a test, it's going to show up. So that's something I always just try to leave with people before I get off the platform, because I hear it all the time, and it actually irritates my ears because we don't know the language, and I understand why, because we're just uneducated, because I didn't have this education until it happened to me. So I am very empathetic about that. But when you have the opportunity to be educated, take it, because I love what you said. Like, sometimes we don't get educated until it happens to us, but we need the education, because you may have a friend who loves you right now, who wants to tell you so bad, but can't, because they cannot trust you to understand what they're going through. They cannot trust that you're not going to turn around and say, well, I don't want to be your friend, but you're hanging out with this person all the time. You're going out for drinks. You're having a good time. You're partying with them. And they love you and they want to tell you, but they probably can't, because you're so ignorant that you say things. And ignorant means you just don't know. You say things that make no sense, and then you're not even teachable to learn about it. So we have to be teachable. We have to stop worrying what people will think if we show up to an event that's talking about HIV. We have to stop worrying about that. We have to be willing to be teachable and learn, because at this point, it's over like 17 million women living with HIV in the world. Right? And then there's 1 in 9 women in the United States. If it's 9 women in the room that have HIV, 1 of them don't know. This is why you got to go get tested.
So why you thinking you in the club? Yeah, all these hoes in here fine. It's like, you better hope you pick the right one, because I mean, you don't know, like you just don't. And nobody's thinking like that. They think it has a look, oh, she look like she healthy, or she look like she this, or he look like he that. It's like, and like you said, for you to say 1 in 9 people, it's like 9 people right now. And you're thinking about your circle of people. Do they not know because they never got tested, or maybe they're not you said, maybe they haven't felt comfortable enough to tell you because of the mental health side of it, of how people are going to accept you, you know.
Yeah. So we got to kill the stigma. Got to get educated. Like, nobody's saying sex is bad, right? Nobody's saying that. What we're saying is
Brian, Brian said, shut up, Brian. I'm just thinking about sack and pumping and all this stuff. I'm like, Brian, you can't even, I'm not even including him in any more of these conversations because it's like his southern throwing me off. I'm like,
you are hilarious.
I'm like, I know. That's one thing I'm bad about. It's like something can happen and like 2 hours later I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, damn, why am I still thinking about that stupid stuff? Oh my God. But yeah, wow. That's you know, when you talk about just that mental side, you just never know what somebody's dealing with. So Brian, did you have anything else before we close her out?
Yeah, honestly, just talking about this topic, you can take some of the points from this topic to talk about racism, to talk about gun rights, to talk about all these different things, whereas people, they ignorantly take that little piece, that little soundbite that a certain, batch of people feed you, and they take it and run with, and they don't educate themselves on what the whole truth is, and they only want to know what the truth that's going to benefit their intentions is. And it's a thing here, especially where you were in Alabama, so you can relate. Here in Mississippi, Alabama area, when it comes to racism, you mentioned ignorance, and I use the term ignorance. It's literally just the lack of information, lack of knowledge. So I'm not like demeaning you just don't know. But when you're intentionally ignorant and you don't want to learn, that's when we got a problem. And we got so many people that, you know what, I don't want to talk about that AIDS, that HIV stuff. No, I want to talk about that. So they're going to stay ignorant and continue to spread mistruths and just put more and more people in bad situations. So I just want to thank you for not allowing yourself to fall into the dark place and stay in a dark place, because there's so many people whose lives are being able to be saved because you're letting your voice be heard. I just want to congratulate you for doing what you're doing, because we need more of them out there like you, for sure.
Thank you.
I'll tell you what.
So if you could leave us with if you can leave us with, I want you to give one. You've given a lot, but if you could say one thing to that girl out there who's listening, and if you could say something to that one boy who's out there, or man, what would it be? And then next, let us know where people can buy your books. You can show your books and stuff for us, and where they can buy it and how to purchase it, and if you have any events and stuff coming up. So if you can do that for us.
Okay, so let's see. I got a lot. I've been having a lot to say when I get on these interviews. I promise I don't talk this much in real life. So to that one girl, I want to talk to two girls actually. So I want to talk to the girl that's living with HIV who is scared. I just want to let you know that there is support for you. And I just advise you to take a scroll on Google, YouTube. You don't ever have to get in a physical support group if that's not where you are. But I want you to go get support and begin to just advocate for yourself. Get educated and advocate for yourself and speak up for yourself, because if you need help, it's help out there. Don't be like me, who sit and wait and assume that it just wasn't no help because I didn't see it. It is help for you. So I just want you to remember that you are not tainted, that you are not hated, that you are not what they said you are. You're everything that God says you are. And to the girl that is growing up, your test may be negative, right? And you're still in this world trying to figure it out. And I just want you to know that protect yourself. Don't ever let them tell you that it feel better with the condom off. Listen, you want to protect yourself. You want to get tested. Love yourself always. And that's to both of y'all. Always love yourself more than enough, right? Love yourself enough to speak up for yourself. So I guess it's the same thing to both of y'all. And to the men, I want to say, her test is not yours. Go get tested. Love yourself too. Right. I know they told you, get all the women.
You need to say that one more.
Love yourself too. Her test is not yours. Love yourself too. I know they tell you to go get all the women, but some of them men tell you that's because they don't love themselves. They don't love themselves to understand that they're kings and where you lay your seed matters. Okay, so I want you to love yourself enough to get tested and really really be an example. Be dare to be different. We always want to set a trend. Why don't you be a trendsetter and do something different this time? So that's all I have. I don't usually mentor a lot of men, so hey, but that's what I got. But both of my books are on Amazon. So I wrote this book in 2018. This is Life After HIV, Removing the Mask. So I just share my story. It has amazing reviews. So if you want to go deeper about a lot of what I shared today, you'll hear in this book. But I just released a new book, and I know you hardly see the title, but it's called Lover's Journey. Let's put it in the camera. Yeah. So this book is also on Amazon. I just released this last month. And this is all about learning how to love yourself so you can walk out God's purpose. So I'm a little bit more vulnerable in this book, actually. But I do teach you how to learn how to love yourself as how Christ loves you and how to walk out who God called you to be, despite whatever happens to you. Because my life is, HIV was a piece of the story, but I've been through so many other things outside of that. One thing I used to think, say this last thought, I used to think that after I got diagnosed with HIV, that God should just leave me alone. Like nothing else should happen to me. I was like, God, I got HIV. No, nothing else needs to happen to me. And when you live your life for Christ, that's just not how that works. So I learned a lot, and I just share it with you here in this book. So this book just came out, and I had a publisher, Beyond Book Media. I just got to shout out my publisher, Data Bomb. And so yeah, both of them are on Amazon. You can get both of them. Leave a review, and if you're ever in Atlanta and I have an event, I'll sign your book for you. And the only thing I have coming up is my nonprofit is having an event on Saturday, actually, June 12th. We're having a paint party here in Atlanta. We're going to talk about HIV awareness. But it's all about love, actually, just self-love and self-care, and understand that we can overcome stigma, which we talked about a lot here today. And note that wasn't planned. Talk about overcoming stigma with love. We're going to have a paint party. We have lunch. It's going to be a really good time. I think I will throw great events, but you can come and be the judge yourself. So that is what we're doing. And just thank you both for having me. I'm just so happy we're able to do this podcast. I had a really good time, even though sometimes I was like, oh, we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about it. So thank you so much. I had a good time, and I cannot wait to just see what else you all do and be able to come back and visit, be blessed on your podcast again. So
thank you. You're an amazing woman, and it is definitely an honor and a blessing to have met a woman like you, and you family now. So, whatever we have going on that we're doing within the Black community, you will always be informed on it, because, it's people like you that we need, women like you that we need, that have a voice and not afraid to use their voice and speak their story. So I definitely appreciate you for that. I'm sorry, I have a schnauzer that's protecting me, even though he's really small,
yeah,
but in his mind he's really big. But I definitely want to let you know that I appreciate you, and that we appreciate having you on the Black Podcast. And what I thought the show was going to be was something totally different, but it was better, and that's what he does, right? So we go in with one idea, and then he flips the script and do something totally different. So I can't even, I'm lost for words, but I just want to thank you for your vulnerability, for you sharing your story, and that, and for this a journey that you're on, because I'm sure that you haven't even touched the surface of what you're going to be doing yet. But we're just so happy to be connected with you, and we thank you for just being you. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I would second that. And I just want everybody to remember that last takeaway that she left. Like, don't go out here following all the trends. Be the trendsetter. Be the one that's different. Don't do what everyone else is doing. I really appreciated that, because I live that type of way. I don't like being and doing what's the new hot thing. No. So we appreciate you. We're going to put you backstage really quick as we close out, and then we'll come back and close out things with you after the show is over.
Okay.
Thank you one last time. Guys, y'all make sure that y'all share this video, and we definitely have to have her on again one of these days. All right, now. Thank you again. All right.
Well, I mean, I know we went a little bit over our usual time, but I felt like the information that she provided us was so important because we have been misled, especially in the Black community, about HIV, about AIDS, what's the difference, how you can catch it, can you catch it? I feel like that is so important, because like she said, it's 1 in 9 women, 1 in every 9 women. So it's like there might be somebody in your circle right now who may not know or know, but not doesn't know how to share it with you because they're scared of what you may say. So, and even with men, I'm not sure what the numbers are. I know it says 1 in 9 for women, but I don't know what it is for men. I'm sure that number is probably 1 in 6 or 5 because it's like more things going on with men. But it's like, how many people are in your circle that may need to know this information, or who aren't saying anything because being scared of what somebody may think of them?
Exactly. And just the whole notion of it going like where you don't even like asymptomatic for 10 to 12 years. 10 to 12 years. Like, can you think about that? You out here just doing everything with everybody 10 to 12 years because you ain't going to get tested. So, yeah, everybody listening to this, if you're active, schedule you an appointment, go get tested sometime soon. I'm going to be doing that.
Whether you fine or not fine, you need to go get
Yeah.
tested. Like, we don't, like you said, it doesn't have, everybody doesn't have symptoms, don't show signs. So don't just assume because you think that you're healthy doesn't mean that what's going on in your body internally is where it should be. So please make sure you go, and I know that with women, last time I went to go to the doctor, they were like, "Oh, well, you don't have to come every year, to get this test or that test." Because I said, "Look, if I have to pay, I'm gonna get all my stuff, and I'm gonna come in here 2 or 3 times a year because I want to make sure my body with everything, not just with diseases and stuff like that, but just with knowing what's going on in your body and being more aware of what your body's doing. Is so important. So you can't, there's no way, but there's people out there that have gone years and years and years without going to the doctor. And we're not talking about for a man going to get a physical. We're talking about going and actually getting a full panel and checks inside out. How many men out there can say they've done that? And how many women can say that they go and get full panels? Because you can actually go get a pap smear and not ask for HIV test. So don't assume because she got a pap smear and she's good that she doesn't have anything else. You don't know. So we have to just really be careful. And so it's a little bit scary. It definitely has you thinking about, the choices you've made in your life and what you're making right now, because you just never know. So I definitely appreciate her. And please make sure that you check out us here every Thursday. Can you mute? I think it's like an extra noise coming in. Please make sure that you check us out every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time here. We're always live on YouTube, and we also are on Spotify. So you will find some of our shows starting to get up on Spotify. So you'll be able to check us out there, and we'll let you know when it's full blown. But we are YouTube Live and Facebook Live and Instagram Live. So please make sure that you check us out on We Are HSBA, where you can learn more about not only the Black podcast, but what we're doing in the Black community, as far as our mentorship and leadership program. And everybody who's a guest on here is a part of this organization. They don't even know it yet, but they are. And so you are also a part of the HSBA, because there are things that we can do within the community, whether you want to volunteer or come out and be an instructor for us, or whatever you decide that you want to do, how you want to contribute to HSBA in the Black community. Please make sure you check out our website and find out how you can help, or even bring us onto your campus, whether you're working in a high school, a college, a HBCU, it could be a corporate company, organization. We are willing to come out and speak and hold workshops at your location, at your organization. So please make sure you look at us at wearehsba.com and find out more what we're doing within the Black community.
What she said. Hello, let me point that way. What she said. Yes, guys. Well, that was another great Thursday. We do it pretty much every Thursday, like clockwork, 4:00 p.m. Central Time. We're coming up on 1 year here in about a month and a half. We're going to be up on our 1 year anniversary. And I look forward to just continue to bring in more and more people and just to build the network of of influence that we're looking to utilize to impact that next generation. Off that note, same place, same time next week. Y'all have a good one.